military family, Eagle Scout, homecoming court, varsity Letterman jacket. He didn't do anything other college kids hadn't done. It's a short drive. I'll drive slow. I'm careful. He didn't think thoughts we haven't all thought. Yet in a blink of an eye, 2 girls were dead, and he was sentenced to 22 years in prison on 2 counts of DUI manslaughter. Today, he's going to share what happened and the unique partnership he developed with one of the girls' mothers. Former inmate P22679, current proponent of choice, Eric Smallridge. Thanks for coming to the show.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Meredith. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so easy for us to read a headline and hear about like a drunk driving incident, and we can like easily look down our nose on that, because when I was thinking about my thoughts of, driving drunk and that sort of thing, honestly, I had like this caricature in my head. The drunk hiccuping cartoon, dirty, maybe sloppily dressed man stumbling out of a car. That's what I thought of when I thought of drunk driving, but that's not how it happened for you, and I don't think that's how it happens for a lot of people. So walk us through your mindset that night of what actually did happen.
Yeah, and what you said is so accurate. When you see the man in a suit, the lobbyist, the legislator, the judge, when you see these people at the bar, you think, oh, they're highly sophisticated. They know their limits. It's not going to be that guy that goes out and kills somebody drinking and driving, and God forbid they get pulled over. And here I was raised my dad was military. I wouldn't say we had a silver spoon in our mouth by any stretch of the imagination, but my mom was the school administrator. They both graduated top of their class from University of Miami. And then I was an athlete, like you said, an Eagle Scout. We all know that death occurs from drinking and driving. We just never associate it with ourselves. And I think that's kind of what I had done. I had fooled myself into believing that just wasn't a possibility for me. If you ask me the question, hey, Eric, do you know people die every day drinking and driving? I'd say absolutely, and it's a tragedy. And these people really need to learn how to figure out when to say when. I mean, there used to be a drinking and driving campaign, but it was I think it was Budweiser or something that said, know when to say when. And the biggest flaw with that is everybody agrees that the first thing that's messed up when you have alcohol or drugs is your judgment, your ability to know when to say when. And that's why it's a flawed concept. And I think just like me, people tend to hope for the best. And that's who I was in a nutshell. I was a very happy-go-lucky kind of person. Leading up to that night, I had done it before, but I thought that just because it always worked out okay, that it was gonna always. It had in the past, so I thought that meant it was always gonna work out for me in the future, which is such a flawed mindset. And that's kind of where I was mentally. Is that, I mean, who can imagine? I was working so hard in college. I had kind of straightened out my life, so to speak. And what I mean by that is I was in a fraternity at Florida State University. I had moved over to Pensacola to get my act right. And I wasn't doing it. I'm really good with numbers. And so I kind of did it from like a statistical standpoint. Like I was doing it a lot more. Now I'm not doing it as much. So therefore, it's definitely not going to be me now. If it was going to happen, it would have already happened. So I'm in the clear, so to speak. And that's where people, especially, this message that I try to give is not necessarily aimed at younger folks. I mean, it could be your very first time you get behind the wheel that it's not DUI, it's DUI manslaughter. Or it could be your 1,000th, well, however you say that, 1,000th time, your 10 millionth time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't discriminate. It can be that very next time, no matter how many times you've done it before. And so I really had fooled myself into believing that I was out of the woods, so to speak, and that because I didn't do it very often and I was more mature about it and didn't, overindulge that often. And if I did, then I would get the cab. Because back then there was no Uber, there was no Lyft, none of that was going around. I think the whole society had a different mindset also. I mean, it was like uncool to actually admit that you were too intoxicated to drive. So there was a lot of pride going on. That's why I wear Superman shirts sometimes, because if you want to put it in a nutshell, this was my mindset minus the Jesus part. If I had that, I would have obviously been thinking about the well-being of other people, but that was what was not there. It was just the prideful Superman type attitude of, I can handle this, I can do this. And really, honestly, Meredith, I never knew this about myself, but I guess I was a selfish person, because that night, and I'm not like to the bone inherently a selfish person. I think we all kind of have that within us. And what I mean by that is I was more worried about, if I got pulled over and got a DUI, how would this affect me? And that's where the mindset shift really needs to happen if there's ever going to be a difference made in the number of DUIs that happen, the number of deaths that come from it, is people need to have that mindset shift of, hey, this is other people's children. This is other people's parents. This is other people's friends that I'm putting at risk. It's not just about whether I make it home or not. And I think that's how I thought. It was really mostly about me, and I really didn't think that it was going to happen at this point in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree about, you think about just, am I in control? Can I handle it? I love the way you worded that. I have since thought a lot about this topic, and the only analogy that I can come up with, it's like not wearing a condom while having sex because you don't have an STI. The other person might have an STI, so you should probably still wear a condom. So that's kind of the analogy that I have thought about. So tell us what happened. Like, literally, where were you? Tell us, was it nighttime? Was it daytime?
So it was one of those days. I was at University of West Florida. It was a Friday. We didn't have classes that day, and so we decided, let's head down to the beach. And so we went down to the beach about noon. And it wasn't like a spring break trip. I was 24 years old, and so I had done my 18-year-old to 21-year-old days at FSU. That didn't work out so well. So a group of us just went down, and in Pensacola, if you're all familiar with it, anybody who's watching the podcast, is the dock, the pier area. We always had this little planned meeting spot. Whether it be a lake or, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got one of those. Mm-hmm. And so we just had this meetup place. We met down there. We were throwing the Frisbee. We were having a couple beers like adults would do. It wasn't like we were breaking out the funnel and seeing who could do it the fastest. We literally had some beers, a couple beers there. We hung out for hours. After that, we decided that we were going to grab a bite to eat, and then we were going to call it a day. I actually went home, and we were sitting around a buddy's house, and another one of our friends had been working all day. And he came in, and he was telling us about this other, that there was a cool band playing down at the beach. Now, this is Friday before Mother's Day. And so I'm really thinking, I'm in Pensacola, my mom's in Tallahassee, so I want to drive over for the next day to see my mom and hang out with her for Mother's Day. And so really I was going to call it a night, but my buddy was like, hey, man, somebody come down there and hang out. There's a good band. And I said, you know what? I'll go change up, and I'll ride down there with you, and we'll go check out this band. I said, but I'm only going to be there for a little while because I have plans to head out the next day, and I don't want to be out all night. And you know how that goes. I mean, that's the best laid plans. There's a bar, there's a parking lot. Your car's in the parking lot. 9 times out of 10, you're going to figure out a reason why you need to drive that car. And so that's like one of the flaws that I have no solution for. But long story short, I went down there with him. We had a couple more beers, and again, it wasn't a party night. It was a chill band playing on the boardwalk, on the bay, at this place called Flounders in Pensacola. They make these huge liquor drinks. Not having them. It wasn't my night for that. I wasn't doing that. I was driving. My truck was in the parking lot. I was being responsible. you know? And so again, the only thing that keeps coming to my mind is that slogan, know when to say when. And I thought that I did know when. And so the night progresses, more friends come. We're just having a really good time. And again, I didn't plan to be there until it closed down, but time flies when you're having fun, right? And so the lights come on in the bar and they're like, hey, time to wrap it up, everybody. Last call, time to go home. And I was like, oh, man, I can't believe I stayed here the whole time. No big deal. It's not the first time I've stayed out till 2 a.m., but I really do have to go now. And so I went out to my car, and this is kind of where like the whole faith thing comes in. But remember, I believed in God, but I didn't really, none of my actions, actions speak louder than words. So I would have told you I believed in God, but nothing I was really doing. I won't say nothing, but some of the things I was doing didn't align with that. But I believe like maybe he was trying to give me a hint because I was driving a newer vehicle back then and I got into it and it wouldn't start at all. And so I didn't take that as an omen. I took that as an inconvenience. I was so determined. Again, I had that Superman going. So determined that I could drive this vehicle. I was going out of town the next day, so I didn't want to be inconvenienced of getting a cab and then having to come back and get the car. So again, I justified it to myself in my mind. And you know why I did that, of course, is because I truly believed that I could get home, one, but more than that, I believed that the consequences of any decision I made in that moment, that I would have to pay those consequences. At no point did I think 2 20-year-old girls are about to pay the consequence for something I know better than to do, and something that's so avoidable. And I even called a friend. My car wouldn't start. So the buddy that had me go down there, he also took his vehicle. So he actually came. I called him. I said, where are you at? And he said, I'm not that far. So he came back. And we were sitting there putting the jumper cables on my truck. And, that's where it got kind of interesting also. As friends, we will sometimes ask our friends, hey, are you okay to drive? And here's the thing. If you're asking somebody that, do you really think they're okay to drive? I mean, that you don't ask a person that's completely sober that you have no doubt about. You don't ask them that. I mean, you're asking a question that you already know the answer to. And I think that's one of the takeaways from this whole podcast, I hope and pray, is that people don't ask questions that they already know the answer to. Let's be bold. Let's be real friends. Not friends. Let's be really friends that really love each other and say, hey, buddy, I don't think you're okay to drive. Let's not ask the person that we're already pretty sure is intoxicated to the extent that they shouldn't be driving if they think they're okay to drive. What's the answer going to be?
Yeah. So what should we ask instead? Like, hey,
I get you a ride?
I got you an Uber, or just like order one. Don't even like ask.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Instead of ending it with a question mark, let's just take away that little curly Q on top and make it a statement. Let's say, hey, bud, you're not okay to drive, period. I'm going to order you an Uber. Here you go. It's on its way. And you know what? I'll help you get your car tomorrow. You give them a solution.
Yeah.
You don't present a problem without the solution. And that's what I hope, again, the takeaway. And now I also want to interject that I do not blame this other person at all. They were doing what I've done a million times, where I ask another friend who's intoxicated that I'm pretty sure shouldn't be driving. I've asked them the same question. And, sitting in prison, contemplating all of this is where I started thinking about these things. Like, man, what kind of friend was I? Not what kind of friend was he. He was exactly how I was. It has to do with this. We take this off of our chest and put it on our friend's chest. And really it's because we hope. We pray that nothing bad happens to them, because then we'll feel responsible because we didn't do anything more to try to stop them.
Right.
We literally, and a lot of the times people will say something like this, hey, call me when you get home and let me know you made it okay. You ever heard anybody say that?
Yep.
Yeah. And who is that really for? Is that for the person that's intoxicated, or is that for the person that knows full well they shouldn't be driving but is about to let them to drive anyway, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, the biggest question is, what happens when they don't call you? are you going to be able to live with that for the rest of your life? And I know the answer to that because this gentleman, and I won't name any names, or I'll just call him Mike. Mike he said, hey, buddy, number one omen, like kind of signal was the car wouldn't start. Number two, Mike's like, hey, buddy, are you sure you can drive? And I was like, yeah, man, I'm fine. He's like, okay, I just wanted to make sure, because he's about to become a part of this, because he's about to jumpstart this truck. So he jumpstarts my truck. And as I was leaving, if you've ever tried to stop somebody from driving under the influence, it's not like a pretty scene sometimes. Sometimes, especially like between men. I mean, women the same, but a lot of times that testosterone riles up and they feel like you're trying them. Yeah, I'm trying you all right. I'm trying to potentially save your life. And you're looking at me like I'm trying your manhood. Like, all I'm trying to do is potentially save your life or somebody else, and you're mad at me for it?
Yeah.
And that actually goes to show how intoxicated that person is. They can't even figure out that this person's just trying to save my life, and they're not like grateful. Right. They're mad. And it's like, trigger, or like, is that not like, you're mad because I'm trying to save your life?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, is that saying anything to you? And so that was me that night though.
So you
I wasn't like
car,
irate. I just go ahead.
You got the car, it got started, and then you got to Gulf Breeze proper area. And tell us what happened with tell us what happened from there. How about how you were revving your car and then.
Right. Yeah, so Mike started my truck. I rolled the window down and I beat him to the punch. I said, hey man, thanks. I'll call you when I get home, let you know everything's cool. And so I left. And so I made my way through Gulf Breeze and got to a stoplight, and the truck started to idle down. And so instinctively, and again, selfishly, I thought to myself, I can't let this truck die right here in the middle of US 98, or I might get a DUI. And that's the crazy thing, is I was actually thinking about that. Never once did I say, you can't get a DUI manslaughter. It was like, if I stall out in the middle of this road and I'm pushing my truck, there's probably going to be an incident with a police officer, and I'm probably going to get. So I knew I shouldn't be driving. So I real quickly put it in neutral, and I just revved the engine a little bit to keep it idling because it was trying to idle too far down. Well, unfortunately, the guy next to me, I guess, thought I was trying to initiate a race. And so when my truck was revved a little bit higher than idle, when the light turned green, I literally just popped it into drive so I could get it going. And that kind of made the truck lurch forward. And so it didn't spin the tires or anything. It just lurched. And then I was on my way, because really at this point I was like, I just need to get home. And so it's kind of like the horse to the barn thing, like you just need to get there because you don't want to be on the roads anymore. And so I start going, and of course he starts going, and he like comes roaring by me. And there's a situation in the road in this particular area where it kind of does an S curve. And in that S curve, it kind of has the illusion that the right lane ends very abruptly when it really goes around the corner, but it does. But not everybody, but a lot of people merge there instinctively. And the signs tell you, merge now. And so he comes roaring by me. And as I look over at him and I hear his car coming by, another car comes into the inside lane that I didn't see because of my attention's drawn to the car on my right. He comes over into my lane. I successfully avoid him, but in doing so, I clipped the car that I didn't even see in the rear of the vehicle, and it turns it sideways and spins it out into the median where it hit a tree. And both occupants were killed. When my truck clipped theirs, it messed up the momentum of my truck, so it actually sent it into a barrel roll down the road of US 98. And the next thing I remember, after looking over at the car and trying to just instinctively avoid it, was getting out of the rear passenger door of my car. It was, the airbags were the radiator was spewing, the airbag powder was still floating in the air, and I was crawling out of a Jeep Cherokee with no windows left in it, out of the back door, head first, because I was literally wedged in between the front seats and the back seat in the wheel well down there. And that's the next thing I remember.
Wow. And then fast forward a little bit, you were convicted for 2 counts of DUI manslaughter and sentenced to 22 years. But through that process, and I know we're running out of time, but I really want you to share how the partnership with Meagan, one of the girls who passed away, her mom, how did that partnership arrive when you two, just tell us what happened with that, because I think that's pretty unique.
Well, and that's where the Jesus part of this comes in, is the Napier family was very influential in the community in Gulf Breeze, but more than that, they were devout Christians. And even through the grief, they knew that I was a guy trying to better himself, going to school. They didn't know me from Adam. But after the proceedings and everything, after I got sentenced to a very harsh sentence, kind of one uncharacteristic of any sentences that were handed out in any time, because, your lawyers do precedent and everything. They started the forgiveness process very early in it, to the extent that it blew my mind. Even in the first hearings, they wanted to see me punished, but they also wanted to know that they forgave me and knew that it wasn't something that I set out to do. And that's the unfortunate thing about DUI, is that, in a sense, we don't mean to, but we are driving under the influence intentionally, because we know better than to do that. And we have since we were really young. Just say no, like all those campaigns that we've heard, we just don't think it's going to happen to us. But this family went way beyond that, and they were Christians, and they say a belief is only as powerful as the actions that it produces. And their actions were amazing, to the extent that I was originally sentenced to 2 11-year sentences that were deemed to be run consecutive, and then 2 4-year penalties of probation after the fact. And 3 years into it, they actually came, like the whole family, Mom, Renee, Philip, the mom and dad, Megan's twin, Carmen, Michelle, Alan, her brother, and it's a lot of times hard for boys, like men, so for dad and brother to look me in the face and talk to the judge about lessening my sentence. In 2006, they decided to change that word concurrent to, or consecutive to concurrent, which meant I was allowed to do both of my sentences at the same time. So I was actually incarcerated from 2003, and to my expiration, the sentence was going to be 2012. But in 2010, something more amazing happened. Renee had started a foundation called the Meagan Napier Foundation, and she was traveling around spreading the message about the dangers and consequences about drinking and driving and just positive choice making. She also incorporated forgiveness in there, because a lot of people don't understand that. They think that, she's crazy for forgiving me. And she said, no, forgiveness is for the victim, not the offender. In order for her to heal, she had to release that, or else she was just going to drag this tragedy and this trauma through her life with her. And so she said it started out for her, but then it benefited me, obviously, because I got another opportunity, another chance at life. And then also in 2010, she went to the governor's office and the head of DOC and arranged a way for me to actually join her giving presentations. And you can see that online if you just Google it. I was literally in shackles and chains, and it wasn't like a scared straight program. It was a reality check. And so I would go into military bases with her and just kind of be on display, and I would speak, but it was more of a display thing. I said, this is what you can reduce your life to with one choice. And it's so avoidable, and part of my presentation is to ask, how many people have to die drinking and driving? And we all know the answer to that is 0. It's a choice. It's avoidable, especially in times like these. We have Uber, Lyft. You name it, it's there. And so there's really no reason that this has to continue, and that people should feel safe when they drive. Even if they want to go out and have some fun, they just got to do it responsibly.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that we've kind of woven in some practical tips. And so I'd love to wrap this story up with some practical tips, because Like you said, and you've said, the couple times that we've talked before, is that you don't want what you went through and what the Napier family went through to be for nothing. And you're not saying no one should drink. You're just saying, hey, let's rethink how we do this. So thankfully now, right, we've got Uber, we've got Lyft. There's so much technology available to us. So it's not an inconvenience just to call one of those. You can even share it. So I thought of one or two tips, and I thought real quickly, maybe you could add one. The tip that I think was really interesting, I heard from somebody else, was about an employer. One of my friend's employers threw a party and offered free Uber rides home and back again next day to get the vehicles. And that really impressed me. And so that's one tip. But I know that you thought of one or two to share.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and we already know them. The tips are, for me, honestly, and this is going to sound pretty basic, is to actually believe that DUI, that drinking and driving is life and death. Mm-hmm. I mean, in psychology says that everything starts with a thought, thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, right? And I think our mindset just needs to be more solidified on how dangerous and the consequences thereof the DUI really can be. Let's not ask our friends if they're okay to drive. Let's tell them they're not. If there's even a slight doubt, let's make a statement. Let's tell them, hey, look, I love you. Not like that, but I love you enough to make this uncomfortable, And that's what we need to do, is be okay getting uncomfortable, because that's what, when you really care about somebody, that's what it's about. It's like, we say this in business, we say this in everything. It's somebody that really cares about you will make you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. We don't need that feel-good type of thing going on, especially when we're talking about life and death. And so that's what my hope for everybody is, that the takeaway from this is that DUI is, you are just a fraction of something. What did I do differently than the person that got a DUI? Nothing. We both got in the car thinking we'd make it home, and we started out. And then next thing you know, theirs ended in getting pulled over. Mine ended flipping a car and 2 20-year-old girls dying. We started off with the same offense. We started off with the same mindset that we would probably make it home because we had before. And so my hope, my tip is to honestly believe, look at where you are today. Is all of that worth throwing it all away, sitting in a prison cell? The sentence for DUI manslaughter, if just in case everybody listening doesn't know, it's 15 in the state of Florida. It's 15 years. That's what the book says, right? But let me tell you guys something. It's a life sentence. This is something that I will live with for the rest of my life. If I could, I would obviously rewind the hands of time to that night, and my thought process would be, is this worth my life? And the obvious answer to that is no. Mm-hmm. So let's leave the truck. Let's not try to justify this to ourselves. You're not Superman. Be humble. Care about the next person enough to say, hey, I'll be inconvenienced tomorrow and I'll come back, like their employer did.
Yep.
Get the Uber back. The military does it. They will give a little card to all their service members, and they can just show that card and they can get a ride home, and the bill goes to the base.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It really is simple.
And it does start with the mindset.
That everybody will not overthink it, and they'll just do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that they'll see it as what it is. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I am going to link information about the Napier Foundation in the description of the podcast episode, and also a way for people to be in touch with you. So thank you again, Eric. I so appreciate you.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure, Meredith. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.